Yes, like Sakima said, I'm so glad to be here and I'm so glad to be representing the youth voice as a moderator. I'm going to be the one asking the questions today, and I'm super excited to have these wonderful youth panelists here to discuss them with me. Like Sakima said, I am Somaya B. I was a YEG alumni. I started YEG around 9th grade and I went all the way through to high school. Once I graduated from YEG and I now attend college in Albany at Siena College. I study currently journalism, and like everybody, I'm so excited to be here to chat today and ask the questions. Oh, so I'm gonna actually just let everybody say a little snippet about themselves really quickly and just say something that they want to say towards the event before we get started on the questions.
So I would like to go first. Hi guys, I'm Marlene St.Fleur. I am a Julia member. I just graduated from Soda Central High School in 2020, and I'll be majoring in sociology. You guys could hear.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go next. So my name is Mason Hilkert. I just graduated from P-Tech. I'm from Seneca Falls / Alliance, New York. I am part of JOY, and I will be going to Albany starting this fall for political science.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Griffin-Lawson. I am currently a member at YEG, and I go to Monticello High School. I will be a senior next year, and I'm 17, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so those are wonderful panelists. So glad you guys can attend. I'm going to dive straight into the questions, and once again, for all the people who are here attending and observing, you guys are just here to listen. But definitely, if there's anything you guys want to comment, you guys are feel free to do that in the chat. I see you guys, some of you guys have already had. So glad to have you guys here as attendees. It looks like we have a big crowd. I'm going to dive right into the questions to take away from this. So to our lovely panelists, you guys are getting the questions. The first question I have for you guys, I'm going to start off with a kind of overused question, but I am very, very curious. What in your opinion does it mean to be Black in America today? Oh, did everybody hear my question, or was it like, was I? Oh, okay. The question that I wanted to ask you guys is, what does it mean to be Black in America today?
I can go first. I feel like being Black in America holds so much like weight, whether it's like good or bad in a sense, because like we do like face oppression obviously in America, and I feel like that like is part of what comes with being Black, but I also feel like there's so much culture within the Black community, and I feel like that also like, I don't know, in a way, like, there's so much weight to, like, being Black, whether it's good or bad. I don't know if that really answered the question, but that's kind of what I thought.
Any answers are allowed. Anybody who wants to add to that before I move on to the next question, feel free.
I feel like being Black in America now, like I'm really proud of it to be Black in America. It's just I wish we had the same equality as others, so that way we can like have better opportunities and stuff. Because I feel like people don't really care about being Black in America. That's how I feel.
Were you gonna add something, Mason? Or Mason, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. So I'm just gonna give you a couple seconds to just maybe mute yourself and then unmute yourself, just fix your mic for a little bit. I'll give you like a couple of seconds before I hop on to the next question. Yeah, you're still like we still are. You're still muted on our end, and everybody in the chat is saying they can't hear you. So I'm just gonna give you a chance to like reboot, and I'm going to move on to the next question for the rest of the panelists, just for sake of time. But definitely, whenever you hop back in, feel free to contribute, Mason, because your voice is just as valid, and I'm just excited to hear from everyone. So, next question that I have for you guys is, do you guys have any personal experiences of police brutality? And if so, how do you feel it's given you a perspective, maybe a different perspective, or shaped your perspective on law enforcement in America?
There was this one time where I had to witness my dad being pulled over by the police, even though we weren't doing anything. And they basically were like questioning him, asking him very unnecessary questions. And it was like, it changed my perspective on how other people are, especially police officers, towards like Black people. Cause like, I felt like the questions were unnecessary. They were asking him like, well, I kind of like forgot the questions they were asking him, but it was like so unnecessary. I was like, there was no reason for that. So it just changed my whole perspective, and I feel like they could do better when they approach us. Like, we're not different from other people, we're just like them.
Yeah, to add to your point, Cassandra, I definitely agree on the factor that we're all the same, and that it can be quite frightening when you see a bunch of a lot of force in a lot of a situation that can make you feel uncomfortable, especially when it's with law enforcement, because you want to be able to abide by the rules and you're like, what's happening? So I definitely get the safety aspect could feel kind of compromised, and you're just wondering like why, because in the essence of everything, we're all human and we all bleed the same essentially. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Marlene? So I'm going to move on to the next question because Marlene is just hopping back in. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to the third question, which is, do you think as Black and Brown people, we're making the most effective strides towards change? Do you think the division of race and unity contribute to the lack of progress or speed justice accomplished? So, what are your thoughts, panelists? And if you have anything you want to add, feel free. I'm all ears. Or if you need me to repeat the question.
I feel like we're doing like okay as like community, you know, promoting like the change and like, you know, the equality and everything, because like it takes time. Like I can understand like people are stubborn, so they don't really open up to ideas as fast as we want them to, but I feel like as we keep progressing and keep like promoting, you know, equality and that we're the same and that we're like just like any other person out there, I feel like over time people will understand that like they don't have to treat us different. They don't have to, you know, feel threatened or like, you know, feel like they're like more of like a top tier race than we are, because we're like all the same as people. Like there's only one race and that's the human race. So that's it. That's what I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you guys didn't hear the question, because I know you guys are hopping in and out, just fixing the connection a little bit, I asked the question about Black and Brown people and if we feel as a community we're making the most effective strides towards change. And do you think the division of race and lack of unity that we may have as a community contribute to the lack of progression / speed in accomplishing justice? And Cassandra brought up the very good point of just us being all the same, being a part of just one race, the human race, all having the same humanity. So what do you guys think about that? Any other thoughts before I chip in?
I can answer that question.
Go for it.
I feel like as a whole, we are taking certain steps to strive for equality and unifying ourselves, but like as in terms of all races in a certain spectrum, we're all striving towards the same thing, and our community is doing a fairly good job of doing that with all like the rallies and the marches. However, I feel like there's also some disconnect within the Black and Brown community that is prominent, creates a divide, and I feel like we need to somehow overcome that issue in order to unify ourselves to make more progression within our individual community, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I agree with your fact of just that even though we're a community, everybody thinks differently. Not everyone is going to think the same as their neighbor, despite them all being the same skin tone or same race. And I feel that's where people can see a division, but I also feel, and I'm going to get into this more later before I ask Mason his opinion, but I do feel like there's power in that as well. So before I give my 2 cents, Mason, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so you asked the question, like, do you think African Americans and Black and Brown people are making the most effective stride towards change and equality, right? So in direct regards to Black Lives Matter movement?
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Okay, so I think that the unity that I've seen and overall what I've seen is wonderful. And I love it so much. I love the fact that people are trying to make change and are really working together for a specific goal. But in all, I don't think we're making the most effective strides, because at the end of the day, I don't see very much change happening. So yes, we're protesting. Yes, we're making it aware. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the legislation that changes, the politicians that change, things that really bring systematic change. And unless that happens, nothing's going to change. So although I love the Black Lives Matter movement and I support it fully and 110%, I just don't think without political activism, anything huge is going to change.
I feel like, I want to bounce off of like Mason's idea. I do believe that political change is one of the best change that there can be, because we're putting people into power who, not necessarily us, but sometimes it can be us, like people are in power that don't really care about us, and it's up to us to make sure that they don't get reelected and put into those positions again. So I do agree with Mason in the sense that there does need to be a change in the political climate and political activism in order to actually achieve change within the system itself.
I'm bouncing off of that because I do think that Mason brings up a really good point about activism. Do you guys believe, in a political sense, do you guys believe that as a community we are having, like, we bring as much attention to the political aspect as much as we do to just regular activism and supporting injustices and causes that happen in our community? And if not, do you guys think that that should be the case?
Yes. So I don't think the community is bringing enough attention to political activism. And I say that simply because, like, I see statues being ripped down because they're racist, and that's great. But at the end of the day, how is that going to change the laws that are actually affecting us? How is that going to change the inequality that we're experiencing, or in general? Like, how is that going to change anything? Like, we just saw voter suppression in Georgia. I'm sorry, but ripping down statues is not going to fix that problem, no matter how much you want it to. And yelling and chanting and getting emotional about it isn't going to fix it. In MLK, in the days of MLK and in the parades we saw, they went to political offices. They marched to Washington. They called out the system. They called out the specific laws. We saw signs in protest that called for, segregation to stop. And as a result, politicians at the time had to pick a side, either fix that or commit career suicide. And as a result of that, things actually changed.
Very interesting point, Mason. And I think you bring up a lot of stuff that I personally agree with in terms of just political activism and not letting our emotions as a community and what has been happening to us, the injustices, overtake our mission and our goal as a community, which is to bring overall justice in the most effective way possible. And that brings me to my next question, because even though we as a community, as Black and Brown people, we go out and do activism, there are a lot of other minorities that also contribute, and we call them allies. So what do you think of other minorities becoming allies and speaking up and taking action towards the movement?
I think that's great. Like, I feel like the more people that help us with our movement, the better. And as long as they're doing it in a positive way and not making it seem like, oh yeah, we're just doing this so that way we can, like, ride around and yell and scream in public and, like, walk around without, like, listening to, like, the quarantine law and stuff like that. Like, as long as they're making a positive change and, like, actually helping us instead of just, like, participating for, like, just social media reasons or to look like they're doing something even though they really don't support it, I think that's great. I think it's good.
Yeah, I most definitely agree with you, Cassandra, about basically that. I believe as well that ally is an important and amazing part of this whole activism movement as well, because like you said, we're all humanity, and it's just injustice at the end of the day. It's something that just shouldn't be happening. So it doesn't matter where the voice is coming from. I feel like as long as the voice is a positive and effective and well-meaning movement towards change, I believe that it's just as important.
So the way I see it, it's everyone against racism, right? The movement is about racism. We can't define a movement by calling out racism and injustice and then self-segregate and say, you can't join because you're not part of our minority. It just doesn't work. It would be counterproductive. So if you're against racism and you're with the movement, then I fully support it, and Black Lives Matter.
Definitely agree. Anything you want to add, Marlene? No, it's okay. Just gonna give you a second to gather your thoughts. But yeah, definitely Black Lives Matter, Mason. For sure, that's why we're all here, because Black Lives Matter, and you know, a lot has been going on in the Black community recently, and we want to be able to share our voices and our opinions, no matter how different, because at the end of the day, we speak for multiple people, and we're, you know, that's the whole point of making our voices heard and gathering conversation, and to also just have people who are not part of the Black community just be able to sit, listen, and educate themselves on our thoughts and just what's been happening and our perspectives. Because I believe personally, from my experience, not only with YEG, but just growing up, that there's power in stories. So hearing everybody's opinion and stories, like Cassandra shared about her dad, those are very important. Oh, sorry, muted myself by accident. But moving on to our next question. Do you think that there's an imbalance between the fight for Black male lives and Black women lives? For example, Breonna Taylor's case versus George Floyd's case. The time between the two, the justice for Breonna Taylor's case versus the justice for George Floyd's case. Another good example is Alua Toyin, a 19-year-old activist who was brutally raped and murdered, yet her case is still shrouded in silence and mystery. What are your thoughts on Black youth, as Black youth, on these issues? So this is a hard hitter, but any comments?
Marlene, you can go.
Oh no, Mason, you can go first.
All right. There was like a lot. I feel like multiple questions in one. But to start, do you think there is an imbalance between the fight for male and female Black lives? And my answer to that is no. I don't think the Black Lives Matter movement has any sexist features to it. I think it's all unity for all. I think, you know, you mentioned the Breonna Taylor case versus the George Floyd case. The difference between those two cases has nothing to do with gender, but rather has to do with trends, because it's terrible, but George Floyd became somewhat of a trend in social media. It flowed through social media. There was a live video that was taken and people just attached to it, and they got attached to the emotion, and it just kept going and kept going and kept going. Versus the Breonna Taylor case, what that is just as important, but it wasn't captured on camera and it wasn't shared through social media, and it didn't have the same, just to sum it up, I guess what I'm saying is I saw more news and information and signs about George Floyd than I did Breonna Taylor as a result of social media and media in general. And the other case, I'm sorry, what was it? Oh, no, yeah. So the Ms. Toyin case, the 19-year-old activist, right? I think it's like in mystery because it's fairly new. I know that there was some news reporting on it. I know that there was some written reports on it, but it is fairly new. And overall, these are only 3 cases out of the millions and thousands of injustices that happen within our country throughout our entire history. So it's not really a big picture look. It's 3 cases, and I don't think we can make any judgment based on gender from 3 cases. So that's my opinion.
Okay, before Mason brought up a lot, so I'm not going to go into my whole opinion until all the panelists have said their opinions, because obviously, first and foremost, I would love to hear those. So does anybody else have anything to share before I contribute?
Yes.
You can go. You can go. I'm sorry.
You can go first.
Okay. I agree with Mason with what he said. Like, it has nothing to do with gender or anything like that. And yeah, I do believe that if it doesn't capture enough of like media attention, people don't really worry about it as much. And that's where like the trend thing that he was talking about comes in, because I feel like that's a big part on why some cases are seem more important to others, like seem more like out there, even though they're just as important as like what Mason said. So that's how I agree with what he said.
Personally, I would like to disagree with you both on this question, because I do feel like, yes, media does play a role in how far of a reach that these cases get. But however, I feel like gender does play a role, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the movement itself, but just in general, I feel like the gender does play a role, because with Breonna Taylor's case, not many people knew about it until it got the attention it needed on social media, because I feel like they played it off because of her gender. And another case was, I'm not sure what his name was, but there was this case a few years ago, and in court, the guy said that the reason why he targeted Black women was because they don't get enough media attention, so no one would care if they went missing. And it proves this theory correct, because they didn't really notice until the last minute. And I feel like gender does play a role in terms of how far the media outreach is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, most certainly does. And I definitely want to jump into this debate because I'm very passionate about it. Obviously, that's why I wrote the question. But to give some more facts and just also, I think you guys bring up all great points. But from my personal experience and from what I researched, I do believe more in Marlene's point based on the gender scale, simply because when I was looking more into these cases, and yes, the 3 cases I brought up are simply 3 out of 1,000 that happen constantly. But I bring up these because they're the most relevant right now, probably the ones that are in people's mind the most fresh. But I'm just going to use them as examples just because I use them in the question. But bringing up Miss Toyin's case, I think it talks about what Marlene was saying about when the guy, I don't know what case she was discussing, but where a guy was saying that a lot of women don't get the like media attention that they should, or as much as their male counterparts when it comes to being endangered or their safety being endangered. And I feel just despite, you know, like I feel like Black women are constantly have been going missing in just a lot of different ways. I constantly follow cases and stories of Black women going missing, and obviously nobody really knows these cases because they're very minor and because they don't get media attention. And going off of Toyin's case, it's only become big because of this movement, but it's shrouded in mystery because a lot of people haven't done their due diligence to figure out what exactly happened to her. Where she was found, how long it took for her to be found, are all stuff that people are guesstimating because nobody really knew where she was and what had happened to her and things like that. And it's the same with Breonna Taylor, even though her case is more clear because it happened with law enforcement and they were able to just backtrace a lot more easier. They still weren't able to get justice for her, even though they knew who killed her, as quickly as they were with law enforcement for George Floyd. So it gives you a little bit of a perspective of why this is happening. And a lot of people believe that it does have to do with the fact that there's just different perspectives when it comes to the reaction of genders within the community. And even though I do think it can contribute to a divide when it shouldn't need to, I think it could be more of an educational point. I definitely feel more towards Marlene's end. But any other questions, comments on this question, because it is a heavy hitter before I move on?
Yeah, so there was a lot of information there. And I'll be honest, like I'm not an expert in any field of this, but I recognize what you're thinking, and I recognize the facts that you brought up and how you feel about it. And it makes sense that there could be a sexual bias that goes around in the world. and I guess maybe I didn't recognize that before just because of how normalized that has become, unfortunately. So not disagreeing or agreeing, I'm kind of just learning.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what everyone's here for. It's for educational purposes. Even the panelists, nobody knows everything. I'm even here to learn. That's what I'm hoping to learn from you guys. I never think that just because you're older, you know more. That cannot be the case. You know, it's a different world. Everybody has a different perspective, and you can learn from that. So you guys, just from this conversation, I'm just going to say this first and foremost, have made me learn more. So I'm very, very excited to have you guys. And somebody in the comment said, and trans Black women, and I do want to bring this up in this conversation because it's relevant. A lot of trans Black women do go missing, and their cases aren't really looked at just because, again, the racism aspect, and then also because they're part of the LGBTQ community, and that's another minority that doesn't really get the attention they deserve as well, unfortunately. So I just wanted to bring that up. It's kind of a dampering topic, but definitely one that I wanted to discuss. And I'm glad you guys brought your opinions. They're all very, very important. So the next question, I'm just gonna divert a little bit because somebody brought up a little bit of a question in the comments and I wanna know your opinions on it. Anything that you guys wanna state is fine. But this question comes from Lynn, I believe. And I'm just going to the question now. She says, what do the panelists, and any panelist is free to answer, what do the panelists think about getting all young voters registered to vote and vote for a new administration in November? So what do you guys think about that idea? Any opinions, comments, questions? Do you think it's a good idea to have people sign up to vote, like youth? Do you think that we should try to get more youth to vote?
Could you repeat your question? My internet cut out.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm just asking how you guys feel with youth voting, politics. I know somebody in the comments brought up bringing more youth to register for November and getting everybody registered for that and set to vote. Do you guys believe there's power in vote? I know I do. I know a lot of other people do. And a lot of youth, I know it's mixed opinions. So I'd love to get yours.
Yeah, I mean, youth voting is so important, and unfortunately, I just think that a lot of younger people just don't have the I don't know, the knowledge about politics. They don't really have an interest in politics. I know that my friends will most certainly get annoyed with me when I start talking politics. And it's kind of sad to see because, you know, I think that if every single person 18 to 25 voted, then we would see a whole new political country. We'd see a whole new realm of change almost. So yes, I absolutely would love to see more youth vote, and I would love to see more youth vote or be registered to vote. But unfortunately, some people just don't care, and they have no care to care.
Yeah, good point, Mason. I do believe that, like I said, it's a mixed bag, meaning some people definitely are very passionate and then others are not really passionate at all, which is definitely a shame because it does affect us all. But again, I definitely agree there. And great point, Mason. Moving on to my next question for everyone. We are all youth here on the panel, and in the audience, there are some youth as well. We are constantly exposed and a part of social media. Technology is big all over the world. What are your thoughts on celebrities / influencers who publicly show support over social media in regards to speaking up about Black lives? Do you believe that some celebrities in this movement or a part of this movement for likes, avoiding hate, or gaining popularity? Or do you believe their intent is more just along the lines of just fighting against injustices?
Personally, I do think that it's important for celebrities to speak up about the issue and the movement. However, a part of me is also skeptical because I feel like they're doing it in order to avoid the backlash of not saying something, or they're doing it in terms of it being a trend, which it isn't. And like I've seen like a couple influencers and like YouTubers, you can see them like going into the crowds with their signs and then stepping back out for an Instagram photos. And it kind of brings up the question Kim is asking, are they helping or hurting? In a sense, they're doing both because they are helping spread awareness, obviously, but it's also false activism, and it's only hurting us because it makes us even more skeptical of reaching out to celebrities and like putting our trust in them, even though we don't know them personally, putting our trust in them because they are so well known. And I feel like, in a sense, a part of me wants to say they are helping with the movement, but a part of me is also skeptical of their intentions. So I guess that's my take on it.
I think that's a really, really valid point, Marlene. And I do feel like that a lot of people feel that way when it comes to influencers, celebrities, people who are reaching out and speaking up about these issues. Anybody else in the panelists have anything to say before I contribute my 2 cents? And obviously keep those comments coming. We've been seeing them, loving them, and anything that you guys want to just say is well appreciated. Panelists, anything to add before I contribute?
I feel like even though they're like, they might be doing it just for like, you know, the hype or like, you know, for their own personal gain, at least like at some point it does get like, you know, younger people like me, like their attention, and it kind of gets them a little bit involved and like more research is done, because it certainly has happened to me. Like when certain celebrities bring up certain things or like certain donations or like charity like organizations, I'll be like, oh, they actually have like these, oh, they have like stuff to do in order to promote the, you know, movement. So I feel like, yes, it's good for them to get involved. I just wish it sometimes it wasn't for personal gain for their careers.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with both of you. To have celebrities join in on this movement, to have celebrities speak out against about this movement, not against, sorry, but for this movement, to have them speak out for this movement, it very much helps. It does. It gains the attention of people, and that's amazing. And we need that. I would rather have celebrities speak for us, speak with us, than speak against the movement. So let me start with there. But the fact remains is that these celebrities have millions of people watching them. These celebrities have held their position in the higher part of society for years. And these celebrities have made enormous amounts of money. That kind of power, that kind of influence, that kind of money could have been used to start other movements. It could have been used to make other change. And that's something that we didn't see. And it's not like they were ignorant of the world. It's not like they were living under a rock. It's not like they didn't know that there was systematic racism. They did know there was systematic racism. They just decided not to do anything about it. They decided to focus on themselves, focus on their careers, and keep singing their songs or acting on their shows and bringing in their money. And so my point is, yeah, it's great you're helping out now, but where were you when you could have been helping? So sure, if you want to help out now, that's fine. But like, it's whatever. You could have been doing something way before.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really, really valid point as well, Mason. Like, all you guys are pretty much on target with my own thoughts as well. Because even though I do believe that when it comes to celebrities and influencers, it is a hierarchy. You know, you want to keep your power, you want to stay up high if you are already high and you have a lot of followers and people watching you. And I do feel like on that end, if you do have a lot of people watching you, it may be beneficial if you're really passionate about something to broadcast broadcast that on that viewpoint so everybody can see where, you know, where you're coming from. You get more people noticing, educating people. But then I do believe that there's other ways to show it that are more humble and that show a more authentic viewpoint as well. Like Mason was saying, I think he was talking about financially contributing and using their financial, maybe they have a lot of money to maybe go donate to donations or put donations to foundations and things that could really help other people who are less than or who are suffering from these injustices. And then there's also people as well who can maybe do different rallies or join different organizations in a more humble, less broadcast way. But then again, it's like, I feel like there's a scale. So I am conflicted. I don't really have a strict side, but I do think that there are some points that you guys said that I most definitely agree with as well. Moving on to our next question. Another big topic that has been brought up is Black businesses. What is the importance of supporting a Black-owned business? And do you believe that it benefits the Black community in any way?
Of course, it helps the Black community. I feel like 100% it does, because it shows that we can be successful. We can get out of the poverty that they try so hard to push us back into. It shows that we can support each other. We're not savages. We don't fight each other. We help each other come up as a community. We don't just sit there and let them do whatever to us. That's how I feel that when someone has like Black-owned businesses, it like helps to show that we're better than what they want to label us as. We can come up and we don't have to worry about what other people say to us, you know, and bring us down.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Cassandra, about just going against maybe stereotypes that a lot of people may have against the community, the Black community, saying that we don't have our own financial community or financial foundation. And I definitely think being your own boss is powerful. Being able to have your own financial stand is powerful. And it also leaves a generational, a generational impact. So if we continue to support our community financially and lift our community up, then the generation after us will have something financially to hold on to and also be better than where we were originally as a community working hard for these things. And I think that goes for any community. They want their generation after to do better and to be able to be better. So I definitely agree with you, Cassandra, on that point. Anybody else have anything else to contribute?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Marlene, you already started, go.
Okay, so I think it's important to support Black-owned businesses because for so long, the fashion industry like profited off of Black culture, like grills, braids, name-plated jewelry, just to name a few. Those are some of the things these big companies are profiting off of. And I feel like, where's the credit given to those companies that started, those Black-owned companies that started that trend? You know what I mean? So I feel like that's why it's so important to get them where they need to be, like on the level of Gucci and Supreme, because they're the ones that Gucci and Supreme is profiting off of, which is why I feel like it's important to support Black-owned businesses. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Marlene. Mason?
Yeah. So the wealth inequality in America is very real. On average, African-American families are 7 times poorer than the average white family. And the only way to fix this is through higher education, it's through working families, and it's through entrepreneurship. But the other side of that is really community support. We need the community to support these entrepreneurships. We need the community to support these startup businesses. We need the community to support these working families. Because if not, then these startups and these businesses, they're going to fall, they're going to crumble down, and these Black families that are working for their family, that are working for their startup, that are trying to build themselves a lives, are going to crumble with the business and end up in debt. And that's just something that's not okay. So I guess, and on top of that, the whole community will suffer when a business falls, right? So I guess if people want to make change, then they should support change. And the way to do that is by supporting these Black-owned businesses and local businesses in general.
Yeah, I do agree. Supporting, with Marlene and Mason's point about supporting local and Black-owned businesses, and I do believe that there's a power in it. Like Marlene was saying, the creative aspect as well. Like, I feel like as a community, we give a lot of our creativity to other businesses that are not owned by us, and therefore, like, we're letting our ideas go, and we're letting the power of our community and our creativity go to other businesses that are more higher up, that don't really care about our community as much as we care about our communities. So I believe that, with that being said, it's more powerful, it's definitely more inspirational, it's more beneficial, for real, to just keep our community lifted up and contribute ideas and share and just keep it definitely in the community for sure. And we have a question that I really want to know you guys' opinion on, that is also kind of a spontaneous question, but it's from one of the panelists. They asked, how would you have an open conversation with someone that constantly says all lives matter and does not include Black lives? So again, this brings up the very, very controversial topic of all lives matter and what the panelists and myself as well feel that means to you guys. And do you guys feel like it has more of a negative connotation than a positive? And what do you feel when people say that, or have you heard it being said? Any experiences you guys can recall, etc.?
So what you can say to them is like, I've seen this thing, should stop saying that, because say you have like 7 or 8 children, right? And one of your children gets hurt or gets a cut or something. You're not going to give all your children a Band-Aid because they don't all have a cut. Only one child does. So therefore, that child is, you have to really worry more about that child and how they're doing because they have the cut, which is why you don't sit there and say all lives matter when Black lives are not like on the list of when it comes to matter. Like, they're not, people are not like aware that we matter too. So all lives can't matter until Black lives matter too. That's how I feel. That's how you shut them down when they say all lives matter. Because right now, Black lives need to matter too. So they can't just sit there and get rid of the whole Black Lives Matter movement by saying all lives matter, because we don't matter yet to you guys, apparently. That's how you would say it to them.
Yeah, well,
oh, sorry.
No,
I do agree with Cassandra on this matter, because I feel like they're using all lives matter as a way to downplay Black Lives Matter. And I feel like if you really thought all lives matter, you would have said that way before the Black Lives Matter became a movement years ago. It wasn't something that's in the now. Like, this was built years ago. You would have already said something. And I feel like some people are ignorant to the fact that Black people do face oppression in America, in modern America. And I feel like they're using that statement to downplay Black lives. And I feel like that's not okay. And I feel like that's something I would tell them, is that you're using it as a way to downplay the movement and what it's for and like what it's fighting for. And I feel like Cassandra used a great example of the Band-Aids. Like, it's a term of, if there's like 5 houses on a street and one house is burning down, we're not going to give water to all the houses. You know what I mean? That because your house is not burning down. Like, I feel like that's the point, and I'm just repeating myself. So yes.
No, but I definitely agree. I do think it comes from a form of ignorance, or if not ignorance, definitely microaggressions, and just the fact that you or whoever is saying it doesn't really want to acknowledge the fact that Black lives, Black and brown lives, are still not mattering. to you or to the world. So I feel like at this point it's more objective and more effective, and definitely just more in the best interest of that person to really educate and really look at the fact that of that point that the injustices is still happening in Black lives, and to become more educated on that point, as opposed to just trying to stay ignorant and be like, oh, but it's all about everyone, when it's not. It's about a community suffering unjustly and what we can do about that. And I feel as well, it goes along with saying, like, people have said white power. I've seen people come to me, some of my families as well, and show symbols of white power. And that's just white power. Again, it's like Black power, and just kind of staying in that ignorant state of mind of, you know, yeah, you are trying to uplift your community, but we're all here and we're all the same, which at this point we are, but you're not, like, there's still injustices at hand that you may not be suffering from that the Black and brown community is. So I think, again, it is, I don't want to be repetitive as well, but I do feel like it comes from a form of ignorance for sure.
Yeah, jumping on that point, I almost have like a different take on it, but I really don't in the general scheme of things. So I'm going to give it in sort of a weird storytelling mode, but last summer I worked on a political campaign with Rachel Weil for Seneca County. On that campaign, I saw these green signs in the yard, and they were like, they had a bunch of one-line things. It just said, it would be like, love is love, water is life, Black Lives Matter, science is real, women's rights are human rights, right? So it was like all these beautiful things. I was like, oh my gosh, where can I get one of those? So she actually took me to her store and got me one. And I brought it home and I put it on my kitchen counter. And then about 3 days after, because I had it sitting up like in the window, I had a family member come in, and this family member was a huge supporter of me, and she was there during my darkest times, and she's done a lot for me, and she cares about me a lot, and I care about her. Like, we are true family. But she looks at my sign and she gives me this kind of quizzical look, and she's like, all lives matter. And I'm like, whoa, okay, not cool. But it came from a place of ignorance. It came from not understanding what we're trying to say, not understanding the message that we're trying to give. So the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to bring people in. We don't necessarily need to shut them out. If they're white supremacists, then please shut them down, right? Like, away with your arguments. But if it's from a place of ignorance, then I think we really need to do our due diligence and help educate these people and influence others in a non-aggressive way to bring peace and equality.
That's like you said, a very interesting point, Mason, but one that aligns with what we were all saying about, you know, when we converse with people who are not part of the Black community, who do have an ignorance or misuse of power, or how to handle that situation, which I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, not just us in the panel. But I am afraid that time is ticking. And as much as I could talk to the panelists forever, because you guys have so much to contribute, I do have to wrap up this conversation. But there is one thing that I want to ask you guys before you do your closing remarks. It is a final question, and it is a very simple one, but I think one that I would love to hear from everyone in the panel. But despite the harsh realities on racism and the endangerment of our lives, what makes you proud to be a Black and brown person? Any thoughts on what makes you proud to be part of the Black and brown community before I chip in?
Okay, I can. I was trying to let somebody else go. So I don't know. I guess I feel proud to be part of the culture that continues to fight for justice with resilience and determination, even after decades of oppression and injustice. you know, I just feel proud to be part of the minority that rose from the fields and went all the way up to the Oval Office. Like, I'm proud to be part of that. That's an achievement. And, you know, the world, I know, I guess the world is harsh, and that makes me determined to be successful. And that determination, it comes from my roots, it comes from my heritage, and I'm proud of that too, so.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I do believe that our community has a fighting spirit and that we have rose from a lot of different things throughout the years for centuries, decades, like thousands of years even. But we've all come to succeed so much, and to see us be in Oval Offices and places of high power is very, very inspirational, and it just helps us continue to fight. And I know that for me as well, like a big portion is like our community definitely fights against injustices and works to just stand up for ourselves as a community. And I feel like we have a certain loyalty sometimes, which I very much love. And, you know, it makes you feel welcomed, and we have our own, I feel like we have our own ways of just welcoming people in, and I do like that a lot. Any other contributions before we wrap up? I'm very interested.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't, obviously, like, I'm at work. Here, I'll turn my camera on because I want to, like, so, I just like to, I'm not really sure, like, where we ended. However, I do want to say that I really do appreciate that there's something like this for us to speak about these issues and be heard. And even though we can disagree or agree with each other, it's still a place that we can all understand each other's opinions, because I honestly feel like, understanding the other side and having the other side understand us and where we're coming from, that's the only way we can educate people and create change, whether they want to take what we say or whether they don't. And I don't know, I feel like it's important to understand the other side and understand how to better your argument, even if you don't agree with the other side. So I just like the fact that there's something like this that we could speak about these issues and be heard and respect each other's opinions, whether we disagree or agree. So I really appreciate you guys contributing to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marlene. And like Sakima has said in the comments, and I agree. Thank you for coming during work and coming and just contributing to the conversation. We very much loved hearing what you had to say. You brought a you agreed to disagree, or you brought just different perspectives, and that's all what we needed. We just needed different voices, and you brought it boldly and strongly, and you had so much to say that was so informative. So thank you for coming. Thank you for lending us your voice, the panel, and the audience as well. We loved having you. Any closing remarks from Cassandra and Mason before I close?
I just want to thank everybody for like listening to, like, you know, my opinions and like my little speeches on like the matter of the situation, because I really love like being an African American. I love being Black. I love the melanin, love everything about us, because I love that we have so much history and so much to talk about ourselves, and that we're like, you know, we're a great community. So I feel proud to be, you know, Black. So it's great.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The melanin, you know, that's definitely a unique factor that I love as well. Like, I love the skin of our community as well. And, you know, I have to say, Cassandra, your voice is just as powerful as well. And I enjoyed listening to you speak. I don't know about everybody else in the audience and panelists, but your speeches, what you brought, were so relevant and so thought-provoking. So, as well as I said to Marlene, thank you for lending us your voice as well. And, you know, it was just as valid, and I had a great time listening to you.
I just want to say thank you for having me and letting me share my voice. I really do appreciate it. I want to say something to the participants and the people listening, because I think it's amazing. everyone that is hearing our voices came to this Zoom meeting by choice. Everyone came here for a reason. Either you agree and you support the Black Lives Matter movement, or you were here to learn. Either way, you're making a difference. And thank you for supporting us and supporting the movement in general. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mason about the audience. Thank you for everyone who's come. You know, it makes a difference, just whether it's one voice or 50 voices like we've had. I think even more than that has come in and out, and we all appreciate you for checking in, coming in, hearing us speak, and just trying to take something from it, whether, like Mason said, you agree, disagree, or for it, against it, or learning. Learning is the most important part, and taking something from it. And lastly, Mason, you're our last panelist that I wanted to talk about since you were the last word. Your voice was also amazing on the panel. Thank you for coming and bringing your discussion. You brought energy, you brought valid points, and you're very well spoken. So thank you so much for being on the panel, and thank you for coming and just contributing. It means so much. For me personally, I would love to thank everyone for coming, and thank the panelists once and finally for coming as well. Thank you to Sakima for hosting and chatting it up in the comments and interacting when we couldn't. And I'm just so appreciative to be at the head of this conversation. I just love my community. I love being able to be a voice of change. I'm glad that there's still youth going that are creating this narrative and just are such powerful voices. I love that the youth are the forefront of this coming movement, and it just makes me so proud to see this and to grow up in such a time. And I'm so glad I could be the questionnaire. This was so much fun for me personally, and I'm glad I could be a part of this. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, RMM, and I'm glad to be here. So I'm gonna wrap up. I think if Sakima has anything to add, I don't know if she does, or anybody else, feel free in the panel.